and next we are going to be exploring how AI is reshaping IT workflows, team structures, and decision making, and your role each as leaders as you design operating models where human ingenuity and AI agents complement one another. Please join me in welcoming these four wonderful individuals to the stage. First up, I am going to welcome Cenk Özdemir, my elevator buddy from yesterday.
Stuck together.
We got stuck together. Okay, we weren't going to share the stuck part, but we're here now. That's what matters. Next up, Danielle Phaneuf, please come on and join us. Sorry. Great. And we've also got Rennie. Come on, join us on the stage here. I'm going to do my best to pronounce your last name. I've been practicing it all week. Radhakrishni? Wow. Okay, good. Fantastic. And Tim Walding, welcome to the stage.
Thank you. All right. Hello, everyone. Looking in the room, I'm guessing that half of you are thinking about your AI strategy, and the other half wishes that they had their own agent sit in through a second panel. Love panels, right? My name is Cenk Özdemir. I lead PwC's CIO advisory practice. And as you very well know, we're at a pivotal moment where, when we look at the time we're in, IT is not just going through an evolution. We call it a transformation at the atomic level. I know that last 2 years we got into this whole thing about, hey, this AI thing is coming, let's have some people think about it. We're in a much different place now. A lot of technical discussions, platforms, agents, agentic systems, ecosystems, but suddenly we start talking about skills, talent, risk, accountability, scaling, and also, what does the future work for IT look like? What format does it come in, and how does it get managed? So that said, what we want to do today is really look at the changing role of IT from a back office function to an orchestrator for the whole enterprise. So that said, we're going to try to unpack that with three of my partners that are sharp minds in the business. What they do is they live this change today. They're practitioners in the market, working with many of you. So we're gonna dig deep into their insights. And just as a high-level introduction, Danielle works with CIOs on defining their IT operating models in the new, with the new innovations and different ideas around product engineering, different ideas around agentic embedding. Tim, spends most of his time thinking around delivery. He's training agents how to build faster and better code. And to this minute, he's still hiring engineers. So I guess that's the good news. And Ronnie focuses on IT operations. How do you bring in agentic frameworks to completely restructure IT operations, support, application development, application management, cloud support, infrastructure support, and all those things that are being impacted. So that said, let's get right at it. So first and foremost, let's start with Danielle. So what part of the operating model seems the most obsolete? And where do you even start designing it?
Yeah, it's a great question, and thanks for the intro, Cenk. So I think there's 5 things that I'm seeing really change. The talent model, it's a seismic shift. You need more roles that are doing different things in different ways. We'll talk about that a little bit more. But instead of AI just replacing roles, we're seeing it be a force multiplier and change the way the organization works. Second is the org structure. So we talk about these pyramids and spans of control, and that's being kind of overturned. I don't think we're flipping the pyramid completely, but we just heard a diamond shape, we're seeing that, or maybe even like what Dan talked about yesterday, this hourglass structure. Third is the delivery model. So moving from outsourcing for scale and using your partners, to really drive cost out, to really thinking about an automation first, agentic first model, where you can even partner, and Ronnie will talk a little bit about this, but partner with your providers to scale your agentic capabilities. Fourth, the business IT interaction model. I mentioned this yesterday, but traditional models are the business and IT. There is this really strict line between business and IT. I think, how many of you are moving to the product model? I think most of my clients are talking about moving to product. The product and agile model blurs the lines. They become more like roommates versus neighbors. And I think when you introduced agents, you're almost getting into that like very cozy roommate situation where you have this roommate that can work 24/7, no eating, no sleeping, just is available to help you out. And then the last thing is the leadership. You talk a lot about all the skills that are changing in the organization, but I think if leaders don't become hyper accountable for orchestrating all of these behaviors, instill a learning culture, like we talked about this yesterday, in the organization, none of this is going to work.
Well, that sounds exciting. And it looks like AI is no longer a sideline technology, but impacts everything the IT department does, applications, development, infrastructure, cloud, all of the above, right? So, well, let's go to Tim for a second. So Tim, what's happening with the SDLC? So where do you see the most impact agentic AI is having on delivery?
So the biggest changes isn't probably any single workflow. It's kind of looking at the whole thing end-to-end across each of those pieces. It's fundamentally changing the cost of different actions. It changes the way you test and validate. It also changes kind of how you think about your front end. And so we've got a reasonable number of clients who we've taken some of the lessons we've used internally for. In a traditional flow, you get like 10, 20, maybe even 30% performance improvement, depending on the maturity of the organization and what that looks like. In a new reimagined workflow, that maybe you take the tenets of Agile, but it's not the same ceremonies anymore. You redo what that looks like. You get a 10x to 20x sort of performance improvement. Now, we've proven this out internally with some of our internal pieces. It's really been great for a lot of our lifecycle and legacy sort of applications to gain them off. We're starting to take this to clients where taking things off of legacy code, Pascal, Fortran, et cetera, converting that to requirements and then working through to code, doing all the testing on the other end, taking it down to 5 to 6 months, 5 to 9 months versus 2-year, 3-year sort of arrangements for small applications, I think has been pretty transforming. And what you find is a little bit of two things. Mario Andretti said, the brakes are to make the car go faster. It's a little bit like this with AI, where you can automate a lot of stuff, but if you can do more testing, more quality control, pushing your stuff a little bit more, I think you get a lot more out of the velocity overall. And while your cost comes down, your quality goes up. And I think usually you're trading off one of those two. And this is like the first time in a while you've seen that. And that's a pretty significant difference. If you turn AI loose on the scenarios that you couldn't afford to test, you can watch your life come together from a budget standpoint.
All right. I think the whole SDLC concept itself is going to be reimagined as well, right? It's the whole way of, waterfall to agile, and now the agentic delivery in terms of the, agent delivery operations. There's a lot to see. So continuing on that theme of, we started with what's happening in IT, talked a little bit about SDLC and delivery, which is a big function of IT. Now let's talk a little bit about IT operations. A lot of time and a lot of hours and dollars are spent in operations and support, right? So Ronnie, what agentic impact are you seeing, or what are you working on today in terms of how to do it in the future?
Yeah, thank you, Cenk. So the way we define IT operations is basically maintain, support, operate any of your IT assets in the organization, serving both business and IT. Now, we call it keeping the lights on in very simplistic terms, right? And doing more with less has always been the aspiration of any CIO in this space. Today with agents, with AI, that is actually possible. So I see the impact in two ways. One is it reduces human effort. So a lot of the monotonous work that happens in the IT operations space can now be taken over by agents. So examples are triaging of tickets, or monitoring, patching. The list is endless. There's a lot of things that can be taken out, and agents can be built so that agents can scale. Agents can do a lot more with the same amount, if you will. For every widget that you add, you don't need to add another human head. The agent can take on more effortlessly. And then agents can also do all of this with the most amount of efficiency, with minimal error. So there's a lot of advantages to using agents in this space, and we are using agents in this space in many of the ways that I just mentioned. The second piece of it is upskilling the human talent to be able to accommodate this shift. So what does that mean? I would say even in the past 5 years, humans have done some of these mundane tasks. So skills that are required, who you hire in IT operations, the people have those skills. Now you need people with skills to manage the agents, because the agents still have to be monitored for bias, for hallucination. You have to make sure there's no model and data drift. You have to be always training these agents for the next thing that's going to come into production, and make sure that they're performing to achieve those business outcomes. And for that, you need people with those skill sets, people who understand what responsible AI is, data scientists who can train these agents to make sure they're delivering the outcomes. Because designing and moving an agent into production is one piece of it, but then making sure it's delivering to the value is another one. And so creating commercial value is really where the whole IT operations is shifting towards.
It's pretty interesting. I mean, one of the things we're seeing in the market is that we as PwC are very much focused on the operations and support in the new. We actually build a brand new methodology. But I think one of the take-homes for you is that the service management function is being reinvented. That's the key. The whole thing about, I'm providing service, here's my intake, here's my capacity, here's my output. That whole equation, you really have to step back and think about, well, how is that going to work where I have a hybrid workforce? So, that is the strategic layer that Ronnie is talking about. So let's go back to where we started, which is we said what in IT is impacted, but what about the skills, Danielle? I know the prior panel talked a little bit about the skills and talent gap, because one of the interesting things is that, we had our executive panel yesterday, we talked a little bit about it. The last wave was about modernization, and that wave is not even complete yet. During COVID, modernization slowed down a little bit, further value out of the cloud, and then AI layered on top of it. Now we have almost a double challenge, which says, I still have to modernize my core operations and systems. Everything's upgrading, ERP, SaaS, all the peripheral systems. So now I'm going to have to think about AI on top of it. So what's happening with the skills?
I mean, I think I mentioned it before, it's a seismic shift in both roles and skills, and I'll talk about it in a few different areas. What Tim and Ronnie talked about in terms of the SDLC and infrastructure and operations, no surprise, like your IT service desk, your IT operations analysts, your even cyber, which we thought of as previously untouchable, anything that was doing either manual interventions or monitoring kind of work is being reinvented. Two, we are seeing roles that, again, were sort of at the center of the business IT interaction model. So again, talking about product, like product managers and product owners. We thought that these were sort of safe, right? You're going to invest your best talent in these because they really are critical to your forward-looking strategy. But Microsoft just announced that they collapsed their product teams, right? And they're going from teams of 8 to 10 people to something like 4 to 6. And so everyone's having to rethink their role in the new model. From a skills standpoint, we're seeing an increase in things that are really human, right? We don't need more people that can do things faster. The agents are going to do it faster than any of us can ever do, but we need the critical thinking. I talked about accountability. We need people who have really good judgment to call BS on the models when they're hallucinating and they were telling us stories and asking us to do things that we shouldn't be doing. You need to be able to orchestrate and collaborate across not just agents, but humans as well. So I think that those skills are definitely becoming top of mind. In terms of the roles that we're seeing increase in the organization, one of the things we talk about, and I'll put a little plug in because we just published a paper, we'll make sure you guys all have the link with you after this, but we talk about custodians and strategists and builders. So the custodians, as Ronnie talked about governance, custodians like responsible AI people, we really need people who understand the appropriate and ethical use From a strategist standpoint, you need people who are actually embedding this into the business strategy. It's not an IT thing. And then the builders, right? We talked about AI engineers and solution architects, but people who really can architect that future IT organization.
That's great. So let's shift gears a little bit. Yesterday in our panel, we got tons of questions about scaling. So how do you scale AI? What's even scaling mean? So let's start unpacking that a little bit. So Ronnie, I think IT operations is where a lot of the budgets and FTEs go to today, either onshore, offshore, in-source, outsource, different models, whatever fits the organization. How do you see agentic being embedded into the operations in the new world?
Yeah. So as we talk about scaling, right, introducing agentic AI flows into your ecosystem will require the talent that Daniel talked about, will require the strategy that Tim kind of outlined. So say once these things are introduced into production and you want to scale them, I think first and foremost, rethinking or thinking about your infrastructure and can it support it? That would be the first thing that I see most of my clients do and what we are advising our clients to do. So in the past, we've talked about DevOps and continuous development and continuous testing and all of that. Today, we are talking about MLOps. How do we make sure that you have the right tools and processes to maintain these language models and make sure that you have enough infrastructure to keep them going? The second thing is your platforms. Are they modernized enough to be able to handle all of the data? Do you have enough data governance in place? And most importantly, what's your data quality? Because a lot of these AI models, they cannot succeed if the data is not of good quality. So we look at all of these underlying kind of foundational infrastructure first in order to scale. I think that is your kind of crawl step, if you will. The second thing I would say is leveraging agent frameworks. So PwC has introduced a framework called Agent OS that we take to all our clients and we use ourselves. It is an agent framework. It's also an agent orchestration framework. I talked earlier about training humans to manage the agents. You could have an agent manage the agents and then oversee that agent. How many times can we use the word agent in a sentence? And then sustaining them, right? It is not the same old IT operations, and I alluded to this a little earlier. You need people who can train these data models and make sure that the data quality is good, the data is recent or real time, so on and so forth. So even training that skill force, the workforce is very important. But most importantly, I would say CIOs must institutionalize an AI lifecycle management as a core IT discipline. If there's one thing that I would want you to take away, that would be it.
That'd be great. So we want to unpack this a little bit strategically, right? So how do you scale AI in a company? Because AI now became a board level problem. Many of the CIOs I work with, they have or they are in different sequences presenting the AI strategy alongside with the CEO to the board. So the scaling will come from two different angles. One, the efficiency and cost on one end. Let's think of this as two panels, right? On one end, efficiency and cost and doing things better with a higher level of intelligence. But the other side is having a commercial impact to whatever industry you operate in terms of the revenues and sales and throughput of that company. There's a lot of research out there with esteemed analysts. Some quote there's going to be $3 trillion of added company value in terms of their valuation, 6 billion hours reduced. But the most important thing is the best way we find AI to be scaled is having each business unit and having each function in a company have a project about how would you transform yourself or what would your function look like in a few years from where you're at. That will create the scaling. And then the one last thing is I think we always remind our clients that, if you know the word moat, right, your differentiation from your competition, your secret sauce, AI has the ability to delete your moat or create a new moat for you. The barriers of entry coming into your segment, whatever you sell or deliver or make, is much lower. You know, Sam Altman keeps talking about, you know, the billion-dollar company with 1 FTE. That is true. I mean, we've seen, you know, situations where somebody would add an AI capability and now they're on 10 different markets. So that said, I think that's the strategic context around how to scale AI. AI is not going to scale by just telling people to, you know, think about AI. And then the last thing that I want to leave you with is, you know, we truly believe that, you know, like everybody in this room, including everybody in your companies, if you have not spent 10 to 20 hours of hands-on time, what I mean by that is maybe a training class on one screen and an actual, some kind of GPT or an agent platform on the other screen in doing this, we think that at about 20 hours of that hands-on time, you will get to a baseline understanding of AI. And then between 20 and 50, you will get a technical understanding of AI. So one of the things you can do as leaders in your organizations is really figure out ways of getting those hands on the keyboard. And frankly, not all of you, including us, have enabled every AI platform in your enterprise. But even if you did this on a personal level without any enterprise content and just learning, it will scale the understanding, the capabilities. So coming back full circle, so Tim, you know, in terms of delivery, right? Again, yesterday there were tons of questions like, what's the accountability when you have a hybrid workforce where you have a bunch of agents working for you and you got humans working for you? Where does the accountability lie? How do we even think about this?
Yeah, so it's a great question. There's a temptation to want to treat the agent like a human entirely, and they're not. There's a lot of people trying to work on that and trying to get it to work along the way. I think the real key thing is to think about it a little bit differently. So most accountability models today are driven around kind of the human being in the driver's seat. And as you get more automation and longer working and that sort of thing, you really have to rethink about that. And so I like to think about it more as air traffic control. So you've got lots of planes, they've all got places they're supposed to be going, you've got angles they're supposed to be at, and you've got somebody watching for collisions and making sure that things aren't there. And if you look at YouTube and LinkedIn and maybe Instagram, maybe that doesn't work out as well as it should. But the whole idea is to have you watching for the potential challenges and problems instead. So the human doesn't get out of being responsible, but the way they go about it and where they are, I think, ends up being vastly different. And so once you unpack that to a layer, you've got AI agents watching for things. And so as Ronnie was saying, you know, you have to be careful about the size and scope and scale of those things and how much each one's given. You have to be really careful with responsibility in terms of what capabilities they're given and what information they have to make sure you're protecting information the right way. You move on to, you know, you've got development processes and QA processes, and so you need to separate those out differently. And you can do a lot more checking and working through that, as I spoke earlier, on testing and quality and stuff like that, which kind of raises the whole level. But you still have to have humans responsible for the end-up business outcome. You still have to have humans looking at different pieces along the way to make sure they don't have to reset things. And you have to have humans as the escalation point when the AI either punches out or can't do the function anymore for whatever reason to make sure you're handling the exceptions. And I think really thinking along those ways is really critical. When you think about kind of the next layer of AI looking at that, we've already got clients that are doing this today in production, where they've got AI agents that are assisting humans and call centers and things like that. They're getting faster time to close and significant savings in terms of quality of the call. At the same time, you get other agents that are watching that whole thing to make sure it's going well and escalating if something's not going well along the way. And so it's a new way of having agents watch agents and then humans watching the whole thing that I think really helps. Getting back to kind of the baseline thing I'd want to leave everybody with is if you make humans accountable for being AI's best critics and not its supervisors, you're probably unleashing the value that you can get out of that.
That's great. I feel better, agents, managing agents. I was reading this article that said, make sure your agents don't delegate to other agents so they don't have to work hard. So we're certainly in some uncharted waters here. So just to sum it up, and we'll have a few minutes to take a couple of questions here. So our point of view, consultants' point of view, I think the prior panel was the CIO's point of view, is that AI is going to impact every function of IT, all the way from tech strat, enterprise architecture, application development, application maintenance, infrastructure, all of it. So having a comprehensive strategy with skilled people in your organization and get in front of this, and I know that it's very early to think about what would my architecture look like in the future, you need to start doing that. I mean, when you remember it's going to be very easy to replicate the complexity of legacy with agents, because the same thing happened in the cloud. You know, when things move to the cloud, there's like, oh, now we have multi-cloud operations. Now, you know, today we didn't even cover one of the most important aspects, which is cyber and resiliency. And that whole area is going to be put upside down, especially with the breaking of the encryptions and all of those different things that are happening. So the point here is, you know, you need to have a comprehensive plan, and scaling is going to come from not just IT, but everybody in the organization rethinking of how your business is going to be impacted. And you know, having that comprehensive strategy is going to get you prepared. The one thing that's impossible to do is, you know, believe it or not, I listen to at least 2 podcasts every morning. There's AI Daily podcasts, and I'm sure some of you are, about 3 blog emails. There is a problem with the amount of change that's coming through. And our recommendation for that is step up a level, but you need to be up to speed on what's up and coming. I mean, we as PwC, we have enabled ChatGPT internally almost a year before it came out. And we're even evolving, and we're getting significant value. For example, for the CIO advisory business, we have a custom GPT that you can ask any question, you can prepare content, you can think through with it, you can even converse with it. So these kind of changes, I think small changes, but big transformations. So we've got about 3 minutes. If there's any burning questions, because we're going to be around today and tomorrow, you can find us at the booth or everywhere. But 2 minutes, 50 seconds. Any burning questions before we break for lunch? All right. Well, we're going to be right here, so really appreciate the time, and thank you very much. Good job, panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.